for Boom and Image Comics. And we have Dafna Pleban, who is an editor at Boom, and Eric Harburn, who is an editor at Boom. So we're loaded up with talent up here. So for those of you that are not familiar with Boom or aren't familiar with our story, we're a company that has been around for almost 9 years now. We do a lot of different types of projects. We do original comics, and we do licensed comics, so things like Adventure Time, things like Garfield, Peanuts. Through our Boom Studios imprint, it's Hellraiser and Elric and Big Trouble in Little China and Sons of Anarchy. An original series, like the upcoming book that James is writing, The Woods, and a series we just launched with Michael called Curse. So we're an independent comic book publisher, and one of the things that we have at Boom that's maybe a little different than some of the other independent publishers is an editorial team. And you would think that almost all publishers would have editorial teams, but that's actually not the truth. Some publishers don't have editorial support. So at our company, we have a marketing department, editorial department, operations department, and today we wanted to talk a little bit about the relationship, the special relationship between editors and creators. So first and foremost, what I usually like to do in this panel is ask the individuals themselves who are up here kind of what their perspective is on the relationship between editor and creator relative to the creation process and making comics. So we'll start off with Bryce. Relationship between editor and creator.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a sacred thing. Kind of the way I always like to look at the editorial relationship with the creator is that it's about bringing the best out of each other. An editor's there to bring the best out of all the talent that they're working with, whether it's a writer, artist, letterer, on down the line, design, everything. It's about being able to pick out those special things that make those creators so awesome and finding the best ways to help them accentuate those. So it's a pretty positive relationship from my POV because you're trying to just help people do their best all the time. What about you, James?
Oh my God.
You knew this was going to happen.
You weren't preparing for this while Bryce was talking?
I don't know. I mean, for me, I think the most important thing in, the entire comic book development process is the final product. It's built, and there's sort of an idea, like as a creator, I have an idea for what I want the book to be, but the idea almost supersedes what I'm trying to do on a month-to-month basis. There's some times where it's like, okay, no, that scene is wrong, and it doesn't quite build towards where the story should be going. And an editor is, to me, the best editors are people who see that and, who are always trying to pull the book towards the best version of itself. It's sort of primal version. And yeah, that's really what, I don't know. I think that's sort of what I'm always thinking about is sometimes I'll get like, the big email of notes comes in and I'm like, I don't like any of these notes. I'm really upset. And then it's just like, no, these are really good. These are really, really smart. They're approaching, like, there are ideas of how to elevate the material to something more than it was. And that really, that makes me really happy. It also shows, a real understanding and love of the project. So, yeah, that's been my process on The Woods, and it's been wonderful. Yeah.
Michael?
Yeah, I don't think I can add too much there, but, I think an editor's job is really challenging because essentially one of the main things you have to do is being able to identify the best parts of a story that are working and be able to pick those things apart, and you really have to see the forest for the trees in a very particular sense, and that's not always easy, especially when you're dealing with something in script form and you're getting things in the storytelling that we deal with is not, I would say sequential, but like serialized, so you're getting pieces of things at a time and not necessarily the whole picture. So being able to identify and recognize the things that are really working and conversely recognize the things that aren't and figuring out ways to bring them up to a particular level is challenging. It's difficult. And the best editors, to me, in my experience, which is somewhat limited, but the best editors to me are ones who are able to recognize what it is that the writer is trying to do, and bring them to the completion of the story in the best way possible, and not not kind of like go into it with the mindset of what they think the story should be. It's a lot of or new word organic gets thrown around, but it's kind of a fitting word here in the sense of organically building the story up, and like I said, like bringing out those best pieces and making them shine. So it's very challenging. It's very difficult, but luckily Boom has great people to do that really well.
So I was wrong. Paul didn't come in and be obstructive and crazy, but he just walked in very quietly. So round of applause for Mr. Paul Jenkins.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to the wrong room.
We got warned. It's not your fault. I was going to go to the wrong room.
So Paul, just to bring you up to speed, we're talking Frasier trivia right now, and then we're gonna go into edit. Okay,
that's usually the answer.
All right, so let's hand things off to Dafna. What we're talking about is the nature of the relationship between editors and creators, the special relationship between editors and creators.
An editor, I think, when it comes down to it, is the crash test dummy for your story. We're here to take the hits. We're here to see the version of it you wouldn't show your mother. We're here to help you tell the story that you like these people have said, is like, we're here to help tell the story that you want to tell. We're not the storytellers. We're the beta of a program. We're the alpha of a program. We're here to work out the kinks and get you where you want to go. And it's my favorite part of the process is to see how that story develops. Is to when I watch something, I want to know what was the first version of that. I want to know what the second version of that was. And as an editor, I feel very lucky to be able to see that, to be allowed in on the process and allowed to help in any way I can. And Boom allows that. Boom allows us to help tell the writer's story. We don't have that issue of a mandate. The only mandate is make sure that the writer tells the story they want to tell, even if they don't know what it is yet. And it's been a lot of fun. I hope. I work with Paul. He can say something completely different.
See, I'm between my two editors right now. This is great. Which is your favorite?
Who are you going to compliment?
Yeah. This is how it works, and this is why I have the best time working with Boom. I've been in this business for unfortunately 25 years, so I've been doing this for a long time. That's older than some of you, which just makes me feel ancient. But the truth is, that I've been lucky to have experiences with mainstream, with Marvel and DC, and then at a certain point, you sort of maybe you creatively outgrow it. And I'm not so sure I'm really that good at like crossovers and stuff. So I come to do the work that I care about, and I got to do it at Boom. And Eric and I worked together on this deathmatch series, and one of the things that both Eric and Daph have found out about me and about how it works is that I really like targets of opportunity. So we may create a story and we may build it, but what happens in the middle of writing something is that you actually create something that you find by writing it. You don't intend to do it, it happens, especially with Deathmatch, because we recreated the story with issue 11, remember? We just kind of like accidentally hit upon something that was better than the original intent, and we wrote that into Deathmatch. And it's the same with the book that I'm working on with Daph right now. Every so often we have a new idea that's actually better than the original pitch, because you just can't stick with the original pitch. You have to continually adapt. So it's a testament to what we do at Boom that I get the trust to, when I say, hey, I've got this wacky new idea to fit within a framework, that I'm trusted to do such a thing, because a lot of times in the mainstream, that trust is secondary to, say, getting the book out on time, having it cross over with an event with another published, with another book or something like that. Within this framework, I get a lot of creative trust, which is why I do my books at Boom. So my relationship with they're both my favorite. It's equal. Except
Tell that to the judge.
except Daph's slightly more than Eric. I don't know. It's just, what can I say?
All right, I guess it's my turn.
Yeah.
This is actually my first panel ever, and my voice is going. And
your
also,
first panel ever?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
If you're ever on a panel, don't sit on the far end because I have to follow like 8 other versions of what the relationship is, and it's kind of tough.
You're doing pretty good so
So
far.
everybody already took all of your answers.
Yeah,
is what
pretty
you're
much.
saying.
It's like, no, but touching on something Paul was talking about, from the other side, from the editor side, the trust thing is actually something that's very, very important because, I've been at Boom for 3.5 years now, and Paul's been in the industry 25 years. It's like, the fact that he worked with me when I was like, oh, hey, this script is great, but what about this issue, and this issue? And the fact that he was cool enough and respected me enough and trusted me to kind of talk about these issues, talk about, maybe there's another way to do this, or maybe there's an alternative, It's great. It's been a pleasure working not just with Paul, but I work with Mike on Curse, and I work with James on The Woods, and it's been a fantastic experience with all 3 of these guys, so.
Yeah, I'm sure as you're listening to all of us speak, you realize that there's so many different ways to make comics, and there's so many different types of editors, right? And there's so many different types of publishers. So there's some editors that are incredibly hands-off. They're more project managers. There's some editors that are more hands-on. There's even some editors that will, contribute writing and dialogue, which should almost always be discouraged. So what I wanted to ask the creators here on the panel, Paul and Michael and James, who have all worked for different comic book publishers, is to talk about some of the differences in editorial and your experiences. And of course, there's going to be pros and cons, but have you seen any sort of marked differences in the different publishers that you've worked for recently?
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest things, and Paul was touching on this before, is, when you're working at a company like DC, a lot of the time there are mandates. There are, all of a sudden something comes down from on high and it sort of changes the direction of what you were looking to do and what you were hoping to get out of the story. And then sometimes there are edits that are sort of, that come rather, that actually are trying to avoid those mandates. So it's trying to get around something before it happens. So it's like, I want to do this, and it's like, oh, I'm not sure they're going to like that, so why don't we do it this way? And it's like, that grates against me. And the amazing thing working with, Boom is that that doesn't exist. It's only about the story. It's only about making the story better. I've had lots of, not lots, but I've had a handful of editors, and I've had great experiences over at DC where, both with hands-off, and some people are a little more hands-on, but, it's really, like, these, I think I shot Eric an email once because I got notes back on one of our projects, and it was actually just like, I was just really happy because all of the notes were right, and all of the notes made the story better, and there were things that I hadn't thought of that just were, like, it made me, like, when I reading through the notes, it just made me really happy. And I was on the phone with my friend Scott, and and I was just bringing it up. It was just made my whole day that I got these really, really good notes, and then I shot him an email about it. But yeah, it's like, working with Boom has been my best, the best experiences with editing I've experienced. So.
Aww.
Thank you.
That's nice, isn't it? Like,
It's unnerving to get notes like that. Like, oh, these are great. It's like, wait, you're supposed to be a little off here. You're supposed to be fighting me, not...
I just had a similar experience, right? I just wrote a screenplay, and the development executive that I was working with at the studio gave me back these notes. And normally when you do this stuff especially through the studios, you get this creation by committee. It's awful. Like, development notes and coverage and that on a screenplay is horrible. It just usually represents absolutely no working knowledge whatsoever, and I get these notes back, and they were great. I was like, wow, this is going to make this script better. Imagine that, right? So I'll tell you from my perspective, again, I'm sort of like apparently the grizzled veteran up here, which is awesome. I'm grizzled, like my granddad. I have done this for a long time, and I felt that around about 2006, in the mainstream, the assistant editors were not being trained. And I actually went to Marvel at the time, and I said to the people there, I said I felt that we've broken something. I don't know what it was. It might have been overwork or underpay or understaffed, but I couldn't get assistant editors to respond to emails, to pick up the phone when you called them. So the relationship used to be that editors would try to call freelancers, and freelancers would avoid being called. They'd put their phone somewhere, they'd avoid picking up, so that because they were always late for deadline. Now the freelancer-editor relationship had changed, and editors weren't picking up the phone. And I thought that was going to break things creatively. And I happen to have had a very lucky career in that I've been exposed to some pretty interesting people. So I'm going to tell you where Boom has the advantage over a lot of other editorial staffs. I'm lucky enough to know Dick Cook, who is he was the chairman of Disney for 35 years, and every so often we play golf together, right? And he's got a new studio, and he's a brilliant executive. He's made a lot of very big films. And Dick told me that creation by committee was really damaging to Disney. It was something that really used to upset him. Even as the chairman, he couldn't stop this from happening with his executives. He wanted to empower creators by giving them help and by giving them advice, right? So if a guy like that, who literally has made all these amazing films, like he brought Pixar into Disney, he made sure they stayed, he did Pirates of the Caribbean, here's a guy who's done so much of merit within the industry. If he's going to say that story is king, story is first, and that you empower your creators, I'm not going to argue with that. That's somebody that knows something, right? Well, that's the way that my experience has been with Boom, is that I get empowered, but I get helped, and I get challenged. So if I write something, and this is what we creators face more than anything, what do you do when you push back? In a sense, I get editorial notes, and I have to agree or disagree with them. Well, the way that my relationship has gone so far, my two editors, is that if I disagree with something, we talk it through, we come to some agreement, right? It's, you try to see it from the other person's perspective, and then ultimately what you're constantly working on is the best finished product. So I don't have an ego in this. Is my editor correct or not? Let's talk it through. That's the way it should be done. That's the way it should always be done. That's the way it's done at Boom. So, which is why I do my books at Boom. There you go. Follow that.
Michael, 3, 2.
Oh man. Niles. Yeah. What was the dog's name?
Come on, man.
Eddie.
Eddie.
All right. Well, okay. So, I think I could say, that I've been spoiled, I guess, in a sense, by Boom. Because like my experience like outside is fairly limited, but it's funny because when I was working on Curse at the same time as Curse was ending, I started working on this other book, and a book that wasn't with Boom, and it was one of these situations where you have an editor who means well, but you got this kind of situation where you keep butting heads, and what Boom, like I said, Boom's bringing you to the best product, and like what Paul talked about, like having something by committee. And there comes a certain point, because Boom is so great, like I felt like I was like, what is going on? Why does the editor keep arguing with me? And you get to this point where like the story just you get lost. You go back and forth so many times, and like Eric and everybody was talking about, there's a certainly a healthy discourse of trying to figure out the best way, but you also run into editors who are like, no, just do it this way, and you have to kind of fight and fight and fight for your story, and that's when you start getting into problems. And it just gets, I don't say it gets worse, but like that's when you start getting into problems because everything starts to suffer. Because like when the creative team and the editorial team aren't jiving, and you're trying to make something that feels as natural as possible, everyone's just getting lost. And you kind of like lose what the original grain of what it is that you're trying to create anyway. And I've never had that experience with Boom. I've never heard anybody say that. Paul Jenkins, who's had terrific experience, experience everywhere in comics for so long and done such great things. You know, for him to come over and say such glowing things, I think is a testament to everything that is going on at Boom, and it's wonderful. It's great.
So one thing I forgot to mention, guys, is that with this panel, I love to open it up to questions at a certain point. So we'll ask a few more questions here up at the podium, and then we'll open it up to you guys so we can have a discussion about some of the things that you want to talk about. So real quick, I have a few questions for you. Who in the audience here wants to be an artist? Who in the audience wants to be a writer? Who in the audience wants to do both? Both writing and drawing? Okay, cool. And are there any brave souls that want to be an editor? Oh, wow.
Nice work.
That's actually,
One of us.
that's a little bit more than usual. Okay, we're going to open it up for you guys.
You who are about to die, we salute you.
All of you brave souls will have a chance to ask some questions here very shortly. So this one's for the editors and creators. Feel free to chime in as well if you have some thoughts on this. But I wanted to ask you individually what you think are the most important qualities for an editor in general.
Oh, am I going to say that?
Dafna, do you want to take that one?
It's also hard.
Make up your mind.
Now you're just complaining.
I know. All right, the first thing that comes to mind is communication is probably the most important thing for an editor and a creator, really. Like, that relationship requires communication more than anything. You know, it's serialized comics, serialized anything. It's a tough business. Like, getting 22 pages done every single month is insane. I don't really know how this became such an industry that's lasted 70 years, but it is. And sometimes it slips. But like, the worst thing to do is if you stop talking to each other. If the editor stops picking up the phone, or if, you know, the freelancer like takes a weekend off and doesn't like contact. That's the worst thing that can happen. So like, the best thing is to have a great relationship. Like, Paul and myself and Dafna, when we were working on Deathmatch, we'd hop on the phone every month, have like a great conversation for a couple hours. You know, I talk with Mike and James like all the time through email, like every single day almost, when we're doing those books. So I feel, you know, communication is key, and having an even keel, I guess, is a good way of putting it. Like, never getting angry at each other. It's, you know, it's always the book comes first. Like, it's never personal. Like, oh, I really wanted this person to stay alive in Deathmatch, Paul. Like,
It's called Deathmatch.
why did you kill Nephilim? He was my favorite.
Did you just spoil it for these people?
It ended a long time ago. Like,
They won't remember. Don't worry.
Yeah.
You won't
and
remember.
that's all right.
Where's my thing to hold up?
I mean, Eric puts it great. It's not personal. It's one of those things. Is you know, something I think also Boom practices is don't assume the worst in people. As editors, we try not to assume the worst in our freelancers, and we hope they return the favor. Part of working on a comic book as opposed to prose is it is inherently collaborative effort. You have the artist, you have the colorist, you have the publisher, you have the writer, you have the letterer, and there's a degree of setting aside your ego, and not because, you know, we're tamping something down, but because you're working with other human beings that all want to tell a good story. At the core of it, no one wants to do something bad, ever. And so if there's an issue or if there's a problem, it's always best to approach it as this person wants to do good, and we want to help them do that. And you know, when I first started as an assistant editor, well, actually, I was an editorial assistant. I made 3 jumps. Mark Wade told me, you know, a freelancer needs 2 out of 3 things. I want to say that 3 out of 3 things, but whatever. It's talent, it's being on time, and it's being kind. And I think being kind is actually should be the biggest one, always.
It's like saying trust, right? Because really, the communication breeds trust. Wanting the work to be at the top breeds trust. So if you create relationships where you trust each other, a lack of communication is going to damage trust. Like you said, when you want to be kind to people, that's because you have a mutual trust. You don't expect that they're going to go away and be passive aggressive with you or something like that. So, to me, a huge part of what we talked about, talent that doesn't exist, in my opinion. Talent is the mixture of like social intelligence and hard work. And once you mix those two things together, talent comes from it. That happens with an editor, that happens with a writer, that happens with an artist. And so I think as long as you work hard and you're collaborative, my way of putting it, and I've done this in interview rooms and other places, is to literally sit there and sit around a table with everybody and say, okay, let's talk about this. You're not the boss, you're not the boss, you're not the boss, I'm not the boss is the finished piece of work. And the moment that you understand that and agree to that, then you're going to do fine, and it's going to be a great relationship.
And this is going to sound cheesy as hell, but it's true. The same qualities that make a good spouse make a good editor. It's about, and like I told you, cheesy as hell. But it is. It's being patient, being understanding, being flexible, really being selfless, because it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about the book. It's about the story. It's about what you guys are trying to accomplish together. This narrative you're trying to weave and put out into the masses to exist. The tests of time. It's bigger than you. And it's those same things. And you really got to remember, as an editor, you're dealing with people. It's not like we're dealing with robots who know how to pick up a laptop or pick up a dry brush or whatever. It's about people and the relationship that you're building and what that relationship is producing on the page.
Yeah, and this industry is built on relationships. It's all about relationships, right? And you want to work with the people that you believe in, right? You want to work with the people who are creating art that you respond to. And at the end of the day, the people on this the podium are all people that, again, may sound cheesy, but it's all people that I believe in, right? So I enjoy working with them. I want to continue to work with them. And when you find creators who are producing that type of work and are those kind individuals, right, who increase the quality of your life, those are the people that you want to work with over and over and over again. So when Paul's talking about being kind, if you're somebody who is huge pain in the neck, right? Like it's hopefully you're really, really, really good and bring a ton of fans who are purchasing your comics, because otherwise it's just not worth it, And for me, I prefer to work with people who share our sensibility and our philosophy and the way that we do things. So, interesting fact: Paul actually started his career as an editor. So I have a question for Paul specifically. Starting out as an editor and then transitioning into a creator. Number one, how did that happen? And number two, did starting out as an editor help you with that transition?
So that's a great question, actually, because I'd forgotten about those years. No, I hadn't. I was going to bring it up at some point. But, so back in the day, I came to the United States, and I was 20 years old, and I met the guys that created the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I ended up going to work for them. I was the third employee in this tiny little office in Northampton, Massachusetts, and obviously everything went bananas, as you know. Now, at the time, we did Ninja Turtles at first, and then we went off to do Tundra Publishing, and Tundra was created by Kevin Eastman, one of the two Ninja Turtle creators, who remains one of my best friends, and he did it for the benefit of creators, and he really wanted the kind of company, actually, that Boom became, Wanted to do this thing where it was like creator-friendly, where everybody was friends within the company, and so I found myself editing So I spent years, you know, as an editor, I probably spent about 6 years, and I learned so much because I used to get Alan Moore's scripts in for Big Numbers and From Hell and all of that. You know, that's pretty amazing, right? Because he didn't use computer. He actually typed them on a typewriter and still does, apparently. So they came in as this massive thing, and I'd have to read through them. And even then, every so often I'd call up Alan and say, Alan, there's this thing here, I'm not sure, but because I'd be nervous, you know, like, I think you might have made a mistake. And a couple of times he's like, good catch there, Paul. Like, he trusted me. And I was really young and a bit worried about ever questioning something that Alan might do. So you can imagine that setting you up as a freelancer. I mean, everything that I can write now, I can write for my editors. I understand what my editors have to do. And the biggest problem I have is trying to avoid doing my editor's job. I'm serious, and it just means that, like, I'm trying really hard not to insert myself into the editorial process because that's the process that we need. And because I understand what my editors are doing, there's a temptation to sort of like help them with that part of their day, but that's no good because that just gets in the way, you know. But it taught me everything, you know. And I still have, if any of you guys actually understand, does anybody know what Big Numbers was? Like Alan Moore's, like, okay, so one person I think, right, so I have all of the unprinted pages to Big Numbers 3 in my house. It's never been seen before. I know, crazy, right? Now you're going to find out where I live and come rob me.
It's in a safe. He forgot to mention.
You just put out a challenge to be robbed.
Yeah, really.
Right.
Thanks, Internet.
So my next question is for Michael. Michael does work with Image. So one of the questions I have for you is, what is it like? Is that at Image, oftentimes you are almost sort of running your own business, right? I mean, yeah. You're the person who is responsible for the book. What type of editorial process do you use? Do you have friends that you reach out to? Do you have a support system of people that you send out your work to, or do you edit it yourself?
I think my system is just to really hope really, really hard that things are not awful.
Okay.
No, I mean, my system, like, no, I don't unfortunately have anybody who editor, like, so I write Hoax Hunters with Steve Seeley, and Steve will freely admit he's not a writer. He's not really even really interested in it. So he'll read the scripts before they go anywhere else, but usually just say, yeah, cool, man. And I'll say, you know, that's it. So it's funny that way. We have a great relationship, but, like, so he's basically the one who was, like, reading it, and it's kind of nerve-wracking because, like Eric touched upon, like, comics move so fast, you know, and being an independent comic and the nature of Image, where you're kind of on your own. Well, you are on your own in terms of, like, production and getting it lettered, getting it colored, and just moving things along. So that sort of gets lost in the shuffle. Is, like, my responsibilities there, like, you know, getting the script, getting it to the artist, getting the artist, you know, turn stuff around, getting to colors, getting to letter, getting to Image, you know. So when I came to Boom, I was like, God, that's such a relief. I was like, I don't have to see another FTP for, like, a good, I just don't have to touch it. It was so wonderful. So yeah, I mean, my process there, I mean, I think a lot gets lost, and it's unfortunate. I think that, like, I look at my own work with a critical eye, and I see, you know, early Hoax Hunters, and I kind of cringe, you know. I kind of like, oh man, I see so many things that I had done fundamentally wrong, you know, that, like, if there was somebody there to catch it, I think it would have been much improved. You know, I think it's a part of the process that Image is missing out on, you know, and they may disagree, I don't know. They have their system and it works and it's great, but you lose something there, and I think you also lose something in terms of, like, the assistance that you get. Like, you know, I joke around with, like, FTPs and stuff like that, but that's, like, it's really, really time consuming. You know, it's a lot of time you're spending just doing production, and to, like, take that away and just focus on the book, I think it shows. I think Curse, I mean, don't mind me, I think Curse is a much better book. I think Curse is better than anything I did with Hoax Hunters. And I think a lot of it had to do with, like, the assistant editorially, but also, like, the pressure were totally off. Like, I didn't have to, like, email, you know, retailers and stuff like that, like, constantly selling. You know, there's people at Boom who do that, and I mean, I was happy to, you know, do stuff with it, but, like, there's not that consistent pressure. And I think once you have that alleviated, where you're not, you know, your own production manager and stuff like that, and can focus more creatively, the product is just going to be better. I mean, I don't think there's any really way around that. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely different. It's a lot different. You know, it took some getting used to. When Eric's like, no, I'll take care of that. It's like, oh, it's like, okay.
Well, that's nice. Sure? Yeah. So, with all writers, when you're working through a script, at certain points you're self-editing, right? So you're going through the script, you're sort of taking a look at your work, you're solving problems, right, as problems are arising in the script. I'm curious if you guys can talk a little bit about the self-editing process as you're going through a 22-page or 20-page script and how intensive that is for you as an individual writer. Or if it changes at all having an editor or not having an editor.
Well, I can speak to that because when you have done it long enough, you sort of get used to self-editing. You know, like there's a phrase that says "kill your darlings," right? You shouldn't be in love with anything. You're sort of always in service of the story, right? So as a creator, that's what you do. You try the best you can to create something, and then there's a big fundamental question which actually you could put to everybody in the audience. If you're a writer, who are you writing for? Because that's a fundamental question that you don't even you need to come up with an answer about that really early. And mine was always that I'm writing for my audience, but I'm writing about myself. Because a lot of creators would say, oh, I'm writing for myself. And to which, I mean, the answer to that could be, okay, then if you're interested in the history of wallpaper from 1935 to 1939, that's going to be a pretty uninteresting book, right? You got to like understand what your audience wants. So to me, self-editing is more being kind of hard on yourself, but trusting yourself. It's the same relationship with yourself as it is with your editor. Because you want trust from your editor and you want to be challenged. So you trust yourself, you know you're going to do something great, you're going to find something in there, but you have to challenge yourself. You just can't just be. One thing that I find personally very frustrating, and I've had this conversation with people who do my job, is their willingness sometimes to just say, nah, it's okay, just get it out. I think I can't do that myself. Someone once told me, if you go to Hollywood, sell them your B material first. To which my answer was, I don't have any B material. So that's where you have to kind of come from, is like be hard on yourself, be challenging to yourself, trust yourself, and that's the same relationship I have with an editor. So I think I do that first, then I send it to my editor and we do it again, you know?
And like by the time you get to like, and this is something that was so cool working with Eric and stuff, but by the time you get to the scripting process, like, you should be really, really, I mean, you're just translating at that point. Like, I'm a meticulous note taker. Like, poor Tim Daniel, like, man, he really entered, like, Lion's Cave, or Lion's Den when we started, because we co-wrote Curse together. And by the time you get to the scripting phase, I mean, there's so much more to writing than just, sitting down and scripting. Like, by the time I'm scripting, like, I'm just translating a lot of stuff, like notes and outlines and things like that and putting it into a script form. So I mean, a lot of that like self-editing comes during the process of, a meticulous process of figuring it all out before you're even like thinking about writing a script. I mean, that's like you're just kind of like tidying things up at that point. And like that was cool. Like Eric really worked with our sometimes intense outlines. So I mean, I think that's also like something that gets lost, I think, sometimes in writing is like pre-writing in a sense. And I think a lot of legwork comes in that, of like really having a clear vision when you sit down and get to that script phase. Script is something that you got to earn the step of writing a script.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. I mean, for me, like it sounds like it definitely sounds like you go much further in the note stage. For me, a lot of it is like honestly just sort of sitting in my room, and I just sort of I spend like an hour just sort of staring at the wall, like putting it together. And I mean, something that was instilled in me because I've done a lot of work with Scott Snyder. Is Scott just drilled into me both when he was my writing teacher 5+ years ago, and then once I started working now, it's just like the idea of have you seen this before? Is there a way to make this scene more interesting? There a way to just build the drum beat like a lot more? Can you like, okay, you just wrote something, can you make every single scene better? Because there's always something. There's always one little detail, like, and that's just whether it's like rather than just writing like, okay, they pick up a key. It's you describe what like the little keychain hanging off of it is, and then that says something both about you, both about the art and the story, what kind of story it is, and it gives the world texture. And I always try. And then sometimes then I get worried of when I'm, when you're working on lots of projects, it's like that final edge of texture. That's something that that can get lost because you have to deliver the scripts. You have to keep putting them out, but you can always tell when it's something when there's just not that final veneer on it. And I mean, one thing that's changed since when I started working with Boom is that, like, the first scripts, I knew I wanted it to be in this perfect state before I ever let the editors see it. And now it's something where I want the editors to be a part of the final step, the part of that final veneer. Like, I'm okay with them seeing a slightly rougher version than they would of, like, the script for the issues I'm writing now, as opposed to my script for the first issue, which I wrote way back in the fall. So, which is, once again, it comes to trust. It's like I do trust them to make it better and to help me make it better. And, yeah.
I love that notion of looking at individual scenes and asking yourself the question, how can I make this better? Is there a way that I can take this and, increase the quality, kick it up a couple notches? That's great. So we probably have about 15 minutes, and I think at this point what we'd like to do is a group discussion. So there's a lot of you out here that want to make comic books or already are making comic books, so you have some questions, and I want you to now put us on the hot seat and ask us some questions. So what do you got?
I'll be first.
Okay, you go. Yep.
So I was thinking about this whole, how does the editing of the Amazing World of Gumball work, even though you're not in the Gumball team?
Okay. Bryce, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so Amazing World of Gumball is where it comes out in June?
Yeah.
June. So that's a licensed property, so we work hand in hand with Cartoon Network to make that book happen. So the way that works is we identify talent we're excited about. We talk with Cartoon Network and the show's creative team. We see what they're excited about, and we find people that we're both really jazzed to put on the book together. And it's very much a, it's a team thing. We work together and make the comic as we go. We're constantly sending over writers, story pitches, art to Cartoon Network for approval. Then we get it all done and published, and we go from there. So that's sort of, it's a typical licensed comic process.
Yeah, and the core difference is that our partner on a project like The Woods is James, right? And our partner on something like Curse is Michael. Our partner on The Amazing World of Gumball is Cartoon Network, right? So.
Do you guys have plans to contact Ben Moxley about this?
Oh yeah, we've met with Ben. He's very much involved. So.
Okay, thanks.
You got it. Next question. We'll start here and work our way back.
So how does one get into being an editor at Booms or any comic?
That's a great question. When I was coming up, there was no college courses on editing comics, and I don't know that there's many that are out there today. Certainly, there's more comic book courses. Savannah College of Art and Design is phenomenal, and SVA, and there's much more opportunities out there now than when I was in school. For me, the biggest thing that I always tell people is to become part of a comic book community, right? If there's something that you love and you love comics, then you need to go out and find people who are interested in and love the same things that you are, right? And what happens is, I used to work at a comic book shop. I ran Meltdown Comics in Hollywood, and I had this group of people that were friends of mine that came into the store. We all love comics. We were all sort of working in comics in our early 20s, or trying to work in comics. But what happened was, as years went on, we were a support system for one another, and we all started to get professional work and sort of come up together, right? And Sam Humphries, who writes for Marvel, was part of that group. And when you're part of a community, like I said, it's a relationship-based industry, right? And a lot of it is sort of building relationships, people, and it's who you know, in a sense. So look, you need to understand the fundamentals, copy editing, understanding story and how visual storytelling in particular, and how that works. But in terms of getting into a publisher, I think it's really about building relationships and doing what you're doing right now, which is coming to conventions and listening to what professionals have to say and meeting people and just sort of trying to build those relationships.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's really just getting into a company. Maybe it's not editorial. I didn't start in editorial. When I came to Boom, I started as a temp doing shipping and receiving, became the executive assistant, and then got into editorial. Dafna was doing marketing stuff before she came into editorial. Eric was an intern before he came into the editorial system. But they all found a way in and expressed that that's what they were excited about. And when, that's my favorite thing about Boom, is everyone we hire, we like to find out what they're excited about and figure out a way to get them there.
And try to develop, our talent internally.
Right.
And have homegrown people that are within our organization.
Well, I feel like now, too, there's more opportunities just to freelance edit. There's so many people doing self-published comics right now. Just find people who you're excited about and ask if you can edit their book for them.
I will say, touching on something that Matt said about understanding story, there are ways to teach yourself those skills, even if they're not exactly classes. I mean, I was an English major, so that's kind of part of the work. But yeah, a lot of college courses now offer survey courses in reading comic books, and they kind of teach the visual language and the writing. I actually took a extension course just for myself because I love comics. I just wanted to see how they were done, like a writing course, and I didn't want to be a writer, but I loved seeing how a story was put together, and that taught me a lot about the mechanics of editing. It taught me a lot about having a conversation with the writer, because we'd workshop all our stuff together. So even if there's not a course next to you, if you've got friends who love comics, like Matt said, offer to help. Ask them, how's the story going? What's bothering you? Just get a working knowledge of it with the resources that you have. And the world's filled with creative people. There's always going to be someone who wants to talk their personal favorite story with you,
right?
And that's kind of like the first step. So if you love comics, I promise you already know more than you realize. It's just learning to articulate it. It's learning to communicate.
Right, it's the language, yeah.
It's the language,
because a lot of people can come into editorial and understand what a good comic book is and what a bad comic book is, just sort of in general, right? You go, this is a really good comic, and this comic book's not so good. But you don't possess the language to articulate why this is good and why this is bad,
yeah,
right?
There's one other thing you're missing, though, which is you're talking about the quality of comics, but there's also some things that you have to learn by osmosis, and one of them would be relationships with creators.
Absolutely.
Right?
And how to communicate something. If something's not working, you don't go, this sucks, because it's not that simple. And it's like Paul said earlier, talent is subjective. Talent is a combination of a lot of skills and interpersonal relationships. And part of being an editor is learning to articulate what's not quite working, why it's not working, and sometimes the direction that would go to resolve that issue. Not necessarily fix it, because you're not the writer. And sometimes I feel like that needs to be clear. Editors aren't the writers; they are the facilitators.
Let me. It's actually quite a good illustration, really quickly. This is how not to edit, right? Imagine you're a creator, and I said to you, okay, you know what? Great, pages 7 to 14. You need to redo them; they're not good. But I've had that before. I've had that. I've actually not really had that at me, but I've certainly seen it around a little bit. Like people say, "Oh, yeah, just fix those pages," and you say, "Well, what's my guidance here?" No, well, you're the creator. You do it. That's not handing creative ownership to the creator. That's just passing the buck. That's editing for the sake of editing. And my first lesson in this business was to edit Alan Moore, meaning I never edited anything, and then every so often I give a comment. Right, the best job you can do as an editor sometimes is to not edit something.
Absolutely, yeah. Paul just sort of nailed it. I mean, when you learn the language of comics, right, and sort of what I meant about possessing the ability to articulate what's working and what's not working, a lot of the times is internally, right? Because in a publishing environment, we sort of have to justify the decisions that we make, right? The creators that we work with. what artist we want for a project, what writer we want for a project, why we want to change something, why we don't want to change something, right? So you need to sort of have that skill within a company or corporate environment. But Paul brought up, sort of the other half of that, which is the most important half, which is communicating with the creator, right? And a lot of times that is just sort of knowing how to be with individuals in general and like have a good relationship with people, right? And asking a lot of questions and doing a lot of listening, all right, instead of making demands and being too much of the the bull in the china shop, right? which can happen sometimes with publishers. So having that type of relationship and working with people is very important. If you're somebody who is kind of not easy to get along with, or combative or aggressive, editing's probably not the job for you. Have we got a question in the back row here?
Yeah, so Boom, obviously you guys have different types of books, you have different influences from different target audiences. Does the editorial staff, you guys work between those sort of silos? Do you pick projects based on things you're interested in, or how does that work, matching creators with their editor?
Yeah, I mean, the editorial team is divided up. We have some editors who are focused on Kaboom, Archaea, Boombox, Studios, and basically it comes down to creator relationships a lot of times. Eric has a relationship with James, so it makes sense that they would work together on all the new stuff that James does, rather than like, okay, James, we're going to throw you up with someone you've never worked with before, even though you have months and years of experience with Eric. Like, we try and maintain those relationships because it's working. We like to keep things working, and that's usually how we go.
Yeah, and we'll pair people up with projects based on sensibilities. Dafna's a sci-fi fan. I mean, she and knows a great deal about science fiction. So if we have a sci-fi project, that's probably the first person that I'm going to go to, because she has a lot of love and a lot of knowledge for that particular genre, right?
And I won't shut up about it.
And she won't shut up about it, right? And question back here.
So you all talked about the quality of an editor, and one of the questions that my friend and I had, which are both tied together, which is, what are the qualifications for an editor, and how do we get our foot in the door? Because without those two pieces of information, so far all we figure is having dinner with a producer and go, oh, you funny man, you work as editor, make me lots of money. So what are the answer to those two questions?
Qualities for an editor, or qualifications for an editor? Qualifications, as we said before, understanding story, right? So hopefully, you're reading some of the classics. You're keeping up with what's currently happening in comics, film, television, visual storytelling, right? You need to understand how to copy edit. You need to understand how to proof. Obviously, the fundamentals. If you don't know grammar, then that's clearly going to be an issue. But you also need to understand art. You need to study artists. You need to study artists that also don't work in comics. Study fine art. You need to study all sorts of art in order to be able to kind of have a working understanding of what the artists that you're working with are inspired by, and sort of who they're drawing from, right? But in terms of qualifications, like I said, I mean, there's not many comic book degrees and courses in college, so you sort of need to come to the table with an understanding of those storytelling aspects, and it never hurts to have actually done something already. As Bryce said, if you're somebody who's already freelance edited a project, let's say you and your friends are working on a project, and you can come to the table and say, hey, I brought this creative team together, I paired up this writer, I paired up this artist, I found the colorist, I found the letterer, and here's what we were able to produce, and you hand that comic book to an editor. That shows a great deal of ambition, right? And it shows that you're able to get things done, which is a great quality for an editor. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, also something Bryce touched upon earlier about, and even Matt, about how a lot of us started in non-traditional fields of the industry, but the key word there is we started in the industry. If there's an industry you want to work in and it's a creative industry, the best bet is find a way to get your foot in the door. And I know that sounds really cliche and it sounds like it's not answering your question, but you know, Eric was an intern, and when we needed someone to give us an honest opinion about a story, we'd go to Eric because we knew through our conversations with him he knew story. You know, Bryce was you were Ross's assistant, right?
Yeah.
God, it was so long ago. But you know, Ross could depend on Bryce to be there when we needed someone, and Bryce was always there, always on time, always did it right, and that dependability is a big part of being an editor.
And the thing to understand about Eric too is that you had already went to school to study filmmaking, visual storytelling, understood stories. So when we had a question for Eric, he was able to have an answer based on his own experience, right?
For sure.
Okay, we got to wrap it up. So if anybody has one more question, it's a quick one. I'll take it. Okay, right here.
I'm interested in hearing about the process of crafting the notes. Like how do you craft the notes to give to the creator?
Oh, that's a delicate process.
Very carefully.
And really, you never stop fine-tuning that process of giving the note. Look, you know, I think that the most important thing is to, you know, be completely honest and transparent, but do it in a way where you're not being, you know, sort of aggressive and combative, as I was talking about before. You want to do it respectfully, and you want to point out the things that are working in the script, because that's going to give the writer the ability to look at what they're doing that's really succeeding, and the things that aren't working. You want to do both of those things.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's realizing that everyone's different, and so you don't deliver notes the same way to everyone.
Yep.
Some people like just very straight down the middle notes. You know, some people like hard notes. Some people need a softer hand, and as an editor, you need to be able to identify what kind of creator you're working with, so you can get the best out of them. What's going to be helpful? Which way of giving notes is going to be the best for them to do the next draft?
Yep, it's a great point. You never deal with all creators in the same way, ever. You know, because everybody's different, everybody has their own personal style, and again, part of being an editor is sort of, you know, feeling out the people that you're working with, seeing what they need to be successful, right? Finding out who they are as a person and how you can help them and how you can support them, and it's going to be different almost every time. All right, I think that's all the time we have, everybody.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for coming today. Appreciate it.
Would you like to keep the sign? I'm going to keep this just because I want to put it on the desk.
I put it on my desk, yeah. And I spilled a cup of coffee.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. No, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you guys.